I've uncovered some very sensitive information about the TV show Survivor that you need to know right now. Someone call these conspiracy theories, but I'm not so sure they might be real. I gotta get into it real quick though, I don't have a lot of time, they might be coming after me. The first piece of information that I've uncovered propped up relatively recently, and it has to do with Survivor contestants taking hard drugs. Some of you might have heard the theory about Mike White taking marijuana edibles, but that theory is just hearsay and it has no actual evidence.
They're idiots.
This one, though, is another story because we have hard evidence of there being drugs on the island. This brings us to Survivor Panama, Exile Island. Anyone familiar with this season will remember the Kasaya tribe. This was quite possibly the most dysfunctional tribe in Survivor history, and somehow they ran the game.
Bruce would stay with us more than Bobby would.
I agree.
Well, why didn't you tell me that an hour ago, Courtney? You said an hour ago that Bob... I'm yelling in general. Stop with the ring. Don't yell at me. We're talking.
This might have been spurred by 2 kilos of cocaine that happened to show up on this island. But apparently, Aris and Shane were at the water and found cocaine on the beach. What is interesting is that the stories don't all line up with each other. Shane claims that Aris and him were taking a bath, but Aris says they were looking for coconuts. This seems a tad suspicious, don't you think? So what might have spurred them to not be able to recall such events? Some might say that it was because it was 15 years ago, but maybe it was something else. We know from multiple sources that Shane ran off into the woods with the drugs. Danielle said in an interview that he wanted to test the drugs. Shane himself has also commented on this, and I'm going to quote him directly here. He says, "I ran into the woods with it and was going to bury it and think about what could be done with it. I was never a fan of cocaine in my personal life, as I always considered using cocaine when you drank cheating. But I had thoughts of maybe rubbing it in on our gums before the challenges to give us energy." Interestingly, the Kasaya tribe only lost 1 challenge that season, so maybe it's possible that they had a little bit of a help. Now, Shane claims that production shut it all down before anything could have happened, but of course that's the story he's going to give us. Shane is a quick guy, right? He certainly can outspeed whatever cameraman is chasing him lugging a really heavy camera, if there even was a cameraman. So maybe he had enough time to stash some of it or use it. Survivor Productions certainly would not admit to letting this happen if it did. And while the possibility of this taking place is not as likely as some of my later theories, it has a lot of backing evidence to the possibility of it happening at the very least. And it would certainly explain the erratic actions of the Kasaya tribe, although they were kind of insane before the cocaine incident, so maybe that's just them in their natural state. We will just have to say that this one is a maybe for now until we get some more information. The next piece of scandalous information that I have uncovered has to do with quitters, which the show has a very interesting history with. Generally, though, they are seen negatively, and Jeff has gotten pretty pissed off at some people for quitting.
Lots of people like to watch adventure. It doesn't necessarily mean they really should get up off the couch. And I'm now convinced that Colton is the guy who never should have got up off the couch. We brought a quitter back, and we got to quit again.
I don't care what y'all say.
So the idea that Jeff might have actually convinced someone to quit is a very interesting one. The person in question is Janu from Survivor's 10th season, Palau. Previously, all of the people that have quit the game were before the jury phase of it. But this was an interesting case where Janu had made it far enough to get onto the jury. So this would start a new precedent for what happens when contestants make it that far into the game. Despite making it this far, Janu did not have a great relationship with some of the people on her tribe. That, coupled with the toll that being on Survivor had on her body, made her unsure of whether or not she should continue on the show. So, when it seemed like the tribe was going to vote out Stephanie, the last member of the Oolong tribe, Janu decided to quit the game at Tribal Council to stop the tribe from being able to vote out Stephanie. She was then allowed to stay on the jury and participate in voting for the winner. This is the story that was at least presented to the viewers of the show. What is interesting about this situation is that we know that the cameras were turned off for part of this deliberation with Janu and production about the quit. This has led people to come to the conclusion that Jeff convinced Janu to quit instead of staying in the game, and potentially quitting or just getting voted out later. The reason that people believe this is because Jeff despises quitters, but he also hates boring television. And if Stephanie went home, then the darling of production would have gone home, and it would have meant that the Karor tribe would have completely eliminated the Oolong tribe very early in the game. There is no way that Jeff or the rest of the production team would have wanted her to leave as early as she would have if Janu did not quit. So it would make a lot of sense if they would have pushed her to make this decision earlier rather than later. Janu has even said in interviews that Jeff aided her because she was at the point where she wanted to quit but did not want to jeopardize her spot on the jury. This has led some people to believe that she was allowed to stay on the jury despite her quitting, specifically because she was doing it to help Stephanie stay in the game. According to her, Probst left the tribal council area to go on to talk to other producers at this point. This would be a perfect time to discuss whether or not to have her quit, right? Everything seems to line up perfectly for this theory to be correct. In almost every example that someone has quit for a similar reason to her, Jeff has had a very negative reaction to the person.
All right, so I'll snuff your torches, but we're going to keep them here at Tribal Council. There'll be a reminder to you guys when you come back in here as part of the jury of the decision you made to quit.
But in this scenario, that's not the case. So did he actually do it? This one is likely somewhere in the middle. It actually got so controversial online that Jeff addressed it at the reunion and asked Janu if he coerced her into quitting, which she obviously said no to. He then asked the cast if they think that he did, and the only one to raise their hand is Kobe, who was her only ally on the season, which is interesting, but it's not evidence just because Kobe thinks that she might have been coerced. The wording here is important though, because while he did not coerce her, he probably reassured her that she would not leave the jury. Based on what we know from Jeff's own interviews about this and other quitting scenarios, he probably was just making sure that he knew the correct rules before he told her that she would be on the jury. They also allowed Purple Kelly and Nyanka to go on the jury after they quit in Nicaragua, and Jeff despised them for doing this. What's interesting is that Jeff said after Nicaragua that they would deliberate on if people deserve to be on the jury if they quit. But it also means that they probably did not do that on Palau, and they were just discussing the actual rules that they had set forth. I still think, though, that they encouraged her that it would be okay if she quit, and Jeff was much less harsh to her than other quitters because they wanted Stephanie to stay in the game. The biggest evidence I have for this, though, is that if Janu quit and was off the jury, they would then open the door for a tie at Final Tribal Council, which I don't think that the producers would be very jazzed about. That's just my opinion, though. So if you think that they changed the rule, let me know, because it's certainly up in the air. This next theory is one of the most insane ones because of the amount of difficulty it would take to cover up. It's no secret that the first season of Survivor was a breakout hit. The finale had 51 million viewers. This meant that they had to follow it up big to keep people watching. The premiere for the next season would either cement the show as a staple of television for years to come, or it could ruin the future of the show entirely. And while the stakes already seemed ginormous, it would be slated to air directly after the most watched television event of the year, the Super Bowl.
Back to throw Trent Dilfer. Throwing deep down the middle for Stokely. He's got it. Touchdown. Brandon Stokely for the score.
So what if they filmed a season that was not up to par? Well, it would stand to reason that if the first season they filmed was not what they were hoping for, they could just film another season and air the better one first. Or just maybe shelve the bad season entirely and pay off the contestants and crew not to say a word about it. It's not unheard of for them to film multiple seasons in a 6-month stretch. In fact, that's the schedule that they have done ever since filming for season 3 and 4 began. We have also seen them film and release seasons out of order. This happened when at the season 30 finale, they announced the cast for the 31st season of the show, Survivor Cambodia Second Chance. They went from that finale to shoot the season, and then they aired it as the 31st season of the show. But it was not the 31st season that they filmed. They just aired it next because it was what would make the most sense for viewers. They then aired the original 31st season after Second Chance. So if they were willing to do it there for a better viewing experience, then why not do it when the need to make a good impression on the audience is at its highest? So there are two options here. Either they just scrap the season entirely, or they change the order of the season. And one of the seasons we saw later in the run is the actual season 2. For this season to have not been scrapped and for there not to be any jabbering about it, they would have had to get every single person to sign a non-disclosure agreement. This NDA would have had to last at least until now, which is over 20 years, which would be a really long time, but it's not impossible. The other scenario would involve some sort of an NDA to make sure that people keep quiet and don't bring up the filming order, which would probably be easier than hiding the existence of an entire season of the most popular show of the early 2000s. So if one of the seasons was secretly the second season, then which one is it? The most proposed candidate has been Survivor Season 5 Thailand. When this theory started to gain repopularity in the mid-2010s, Reddit user Popsicle Incorporated created a thread prognosticating that Thailand could have been filmed as the second season, but was pushed back for a variety of reasons. The biggest being that it wasn't a very good season compared to the ones that aired before it, so producers likely said, hey, we don't want to air this one right away. This idea was immediately debunked, however, due to the response Ken got for being a police officer in New York. This is because Thailand was actually filmed after 9/11, so Ken was seen as a hero for what he would have had to do on that day. Whereas if the season was filmed in the original spot for the second season, it would have been before 9/11. So there really is no way that Thailand could have been the second season based on this information. Every other theory about another season being the secret second season has similarly been debunked by other timeline issues, whether it be them referencing seasons from the past or them doing things in that season that hadn't been established until earlier seasons of the show. Despite that though, the idea of there being some sort of a second season has persisted and is interesting, but unlikely considering how difficult it would be to cover it up. But let me ask you this. If someone told you that they were on a secret season of Survivor, would you believe them? Probably not. So maybe, just maybe, the cover-up worked. Alright, so you may have thought that was it for Thailand, but for as much as people dislike the season, they love making theories about it. This next theory is about the merge in Thailand, which was one of the strangest in the history of the show, and that's because they faked out the contestants. At the final 10, the tribes came together at the same camp. The tribes are also 5-5, which would have been a pretty good time to have the merge, so everyone thought that it was the merge. This led to Xian, who was at the bottom of her tribe, to make an alliance with the members of the Chuigan tribe to survive further in the game. The only problem is that when the cast came to the challenge, Jeff explained to them that it was not the merge, and he was very aggressive for some reason.
You said merge.
Yes.
I certainly didn't say anything to give you that impression, did I?
What I said to you guys when you left is something very different's about to happen. Two tribes will live together on the same beach. That's exactly what you're doing. You are two tribes living on the same beach.
Like, I don't know, how dare they assume that they merged when this is what happened every other season up to this point. This ended up causing Xian to get voted out by her tribe because she was a traitor, which makes sense because why would you keep someone that was against you in the game? So, is the merge at Final 9 then? Nope. And the Sukjai tribe lost once again, so now they're down 5-3 when they actually merge at the Final 8. And predictably, all three of them go back to back to back. There are a lot of theories about what was going on here. Some people think that when Xian flipped, the producers decided to pull a 180 on the cast and not have them merge. The one issue with that, though, is that there was a challenge that had to have been made for this round. So they obviously had this twist planned out ahead of time, since they can't just make a challenge on the spot. Where it gets more interesting is that they didn't merge at the Final 9 as well. Every previous season merged at the final 10, so a one-round fake-out is interesting, but why keep it going till final 8? This is also the only time in the history of the show where the merge was this late. What people think happened is that they delayed the merge another round to give the tribes another chance to even it out at 4-4 to make the merge more interesting. This obviously backfired tremendously and led to one of the most boring merges in the history of the show. This one is kind of up in the air, but I'm of the opinion that it's more likely than not that this was just a really poorly done twist in a bad season, so people want to find some sort of a reasoning behind some of these decisions. I do, however, think there is another candidate for meddling at the merge that would make a lot of sense. In Survivor Gabon, we had some other shenanigans happening around the merge. Both tribes received tree mail insinuating that they would be merging, and since it was the final 10, it seemed like a good time to do so. The tribes then get together and have a feast, just like a merge would have. But it turns out they were not merging, they were swapping instead for one round. Then, as it turned out, in this swap, the leader of the Onion Alliance, Marcus, was voted out. Yes, the alliance is named after onions. This was actually a really well executed flip spurred by Kenny, and not him getting screwed over by a bad swap. And while most of you don't remember this at all, because it's Survivor Gabon, what you do remember is the reaction that the opposing tribe had to finding out about this.
Then getting your first look at the new coda. Marcus voted out at the last tribal council.
Yes, the most famous gif from Survivor comes from the reaction to the Onion leader being eliminated. And you see Maddie's reaction in the back there. That is the reaction that the producers probably had when their trickery worked. Well, that's if you believe this idea. The theory being that all of the pomp and circumstance around the fake merge feast was originally going to be the merge, but they decided to throw in one more swap, hoping that one of the Onion Alliance members would be eliminated. This is because the Alliance was not exactly the most likable group of people and would have gone on to run the game if Marcus did not go home. The swap provided an opportunity for this not to be the case, as even if a crazy flip did not happen, one of the Onions could have been put on a bad tribe. This, of course, ended up with the demise of the Onion Alliance, as without Marcus, it fell apart completely. Marcus was also the first member of the jury, and while it's not always the case, that person is traditionally the first person to make the merge. The challenge was also an individual challenge that the winner would win for their tribe, which means that it could have easily been an individual immunity challenge instead of a tribe challenge. Some people have also claimed that they saw a really botched attempt at repainting this challenge to make it a tribe challenge. It was also the second time ever there was 2 tribe swaps in a season, the first of which happening in Survivor All-Stars, which is a video topic for another day, but it also has many theories about it being caused due to production interference. This is an example where there's not a lot of evidence against it being the case, and it makes a lot of sense. That dinner really felt like the merge feast, but maybe it was just a dumb fake out. Maybe they just had the last tribe challenge be an individual challenge. Whether you want to believe this theory or any of the other ones that I have explained in this video is up to you. I'm just the messenger here. But I've been Alex, and let's keep it real.
Charlie and Corinne and myself have a deal, so we're safe. I am worried about Marcus. I just don't trust Susie. Susie's crazy, and Susie's stupid, and that's a horrible combination.
The big question for me is, can I get to the final 3 by trusting Marcus? We'll see where this is going to get me. I got to get to that top 3. I have to.